This is Wrestling with Wrestling's Past and Present. I'm Tim Kurt.
And I'm Roland Bulis.
And today we're going to talk about Elimination Chamber 2010 and 2009.
This episode's been delayed a couple times.
I know,
now.
it has.
This episode just doesn't want to be made, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, we called the Rumble last week. We decided to talk about our Royal Rumble predictions, and then we're coming to you a day later than normal. We try to be on time as much as possible, but sometimes life gets in the way, and unfortunately we had to delay this episode by a day.
Yeah, we live in the Northeast, so in the wintertime, stuff happens, and we record at Tim's house, and he had no power for about 14 hours.
Yeah.
So it kind of made things difficult for him. There's no power.
Made it a little challenging there.
But we're dedicated. We're here. It's a day later, and it's now full week later than we're going to record, so it's worth the wait, hopefully, for you guys.
Yes, absolutely. But like we said, let's get into it. Elimination Chamber 2010. Kind of an interesting card. The match for the show was Christian and Ezekiel Jackson, with Christian getting the win.
This was the first Elimination Chamber ever.
Yes.
Pay-per-view, not the actual chamber, but the first named pay-per-view, the Elimination Chamber. It kind of followed the No Way Out pay-per-views. They kind of changed the way they did it, so that's why it's 2010. When we do our pay-per-views, we kind of do the first one. This was the first one.
Yes, absolutely, the first Elimination Chamber pay-per-view ever. And the actual match, or the actual card, starts off with the Elimination Chamber match for the WWE title. You had John Cena in there against, this is kind of an interesting group of characters here. You had Kofi Kingston, Randy Orton, Ted DiBiase Jr., not the $1 Million Man.
Everybody's got a prize.
Triple H and Sheamus. And Sheamus is coming into this as the champion. John Cena would get the win here.
Mind you, Triple H and Sheamus kind of had a little program going. And before that, Sheamus took the belt from Cena. So, there's a lot of intertwined stuff. Kofi Kingston and Randy Orton had a thing going. Ted DiBiase Legacy. It all jived, but yeah, it's weird to look back at the names on this list.
Yeah, it is a little bit.
It's kind of like two different storylines almost going at each other in one thing. It was interesting to note, and we'll get into the last match. It was interesting to note that in the champion in this match started the match.
Yes.
So that was interesting too. That he was one of the first out in the match. And like I said, we're gonna get to the other match, but just try to remember when we discussed the last match, which is the World Heavyweight Championship match. That was a completely different match altogether, and the champion did not start that match.
Nope.
So it made it interesting. It was a pretty good match. I mean, we both rewatched the pay-per-view. I would have seen it when it happened. I'm sure you probably did, or saw some of it afterwards. But it was not a bad start to the pay-per-view. And when you have two Elimination Chamber matches on your card, you kind of have to separate them somehow.
You have to space them out.
So it was nice to start with it. And it was a 30-minute match, and every 5 minutes someone comes in. In case you don't know the Elimination Chamber rules, you start with 6 competitors, 2 start the match. 4 of them are locked in pods, and then every 5 minutes someone randomly comes out. So it went about 30 minutes past the 5-minute intervals, so it was a decent match.
Yeah, it was a decent match. I know sometimes these matches can, for me, a little too long.
Yeah,
it's hard to keep your attention span for a full half hour, but when you have the pomp and circumstance of the Elimination Chamber, that kind of helps get you through a match which has really no choice but to be a half hour long.
Well, and that's what was nice about this match too, is that it was completely different from the other one.
Yes.
So it made both of them feel different. They were booked differently. The matches themselves are completely different. They weren't like, oh, here's another chamber match.
Yeah.
So it was nice they did it that way.
But after John Cena, his victory was kind of short-lived because Vince McMahon kind of came out and told John Cena that he was going to have to face Batista.
Yeah, he congratulated him for going to WrestleMania, and then he said, well, you're going if you beat this guy. Mm-hmm. And out comes his hired gun, Batista, and John Cena's playing up the, I just wrestled 30 minutes, and he's, can barely stand and pretty much gets steamrolled by almost like the Money in the Bank cash-ins a lot happen. It's one of those, like, oh, who's going to win the title? The minute you see Batista come out, you're like, oh boy, like there's no way Cena's going to title. And he didn't.
He did not. No, he went about 30 seconds. Batista would beat John Cena and would become the new WWE champion.
It was back when they had the spinner belt. I hated that belt.
I did too.
Good,
It worked for Cena.
Yeah, but when somebody else got it,
it was just kind of weird.
Yeah, Sheamus carrying around a spinning belt.
I know.
Yeah, it was weird, but yeah, I totally agree.
Next up was a single match for the Intercontinental title. You had a young Drew McIntyre here getting the victory over Kane. For me, this match was just kind of there. There wasn't anything spectacular about it. Just kind of, nothing really caught my eye. It was really being noteworthy in this match.
Yeah, this is back when Drew McIntyre was the chosen one. Before he left the company and came back as the Scottish Psychopath, and now he's a good guy and he's challenging for the title at WrestleMania.
Yep.
So you come full circle in 10 years. But yeah, it was a 10-minute match. It wasn't terrible, wasn't great either. It was just there. It was filler, kind of, in my opinion. But Kane did a lot in his career. He was kind of just used as an enhancement talent that still got over.
Especially in this era.
Yeah,
he was definitely.
He had that lull where he wasn't really a main event. He kind of was. They just kind of used him wherever they could fit him in. So I mean, it wasn't a terrible match.
Next up, we had a women's tag team match. You had Cool, which is Layla and Michelle McCool.
Mrs. Undertaker.
Defeat Gail Kim and Maurice, Mrs. Miz.
Yeah, Maurice Mizanin.
Yep. And Gail Kim married to Robert Irvine.
Oh, yeah.
Layla, I'm not sure who she's married to or she is.
To quote Triple H there about Paige having kids, we don't know. She could be married, we don't know.
We don't know.
That's a little inside thing. If you want to know about it, look it up, because I'm not repeating it because it was in bad taste to begin with when Triple H said it.
Yep.
But anyway, side story. But, another match that was just kind of there. It wasn't very long.
No, 3.5 minutes. Yeah, just kind of a filler match. I think originally it was supposed to be Gail Kim versus Maurice, but then Vic Guerrero came out.
Yes.
And made it a tag team match.
Excuse me.
It was interesting though because Michelle got the win with the Styles Clash kind of move on Gail Kim. That was kind of interesting to note. But yeah, other than that, kind of just there, just
3.5 minute, kind of a fillery, as Vince would call it. If anybody listens to the Bruce Pritchard podcast, he would say that Vince would also let me up match.
Let me up, yep.
That's exactly what it was. It was 3.5 minutes. It was filler. It was your quote unquote bathroom break. It was whatever you needed to do to kind of get going for the next match. And it wasn't a terrible match, but it was what it was.
This is what women's wrestling was in that era.
That's
it's
true.
Definitely not.
It was starting to get better in that era, but it was still just kind of there.
It was still kind of there.
Yeah.
All right, our second to last match, you had The Miz with the Big Show defeating MVP Montel Vitavius Porter, being accompanied by Mark Henry here. This was for the United States title. I thought this match was pretty good. I thought it could have been a little bit better. I thought they could have done a little bit more.
Yeah, and the two that were with each other, the Big Show with Miz and Mark Henry with MVP, they were tag team partners. So that was the thing there, because at the time, the Miz was tag team champions with the Big Show.
Yes.
At that time. So there was a little bit of intertwined storyline there too. But yeah, I agree. It was, MVP I think's very underrated for what he could do. I mean, he had a great program with Matt Hardy for a couple of years. It seemed like on SmackDown back when he was for that very title actually. So like it could have been better. It wasn't terrible. Again, same thing. It wasn't a bad match, but it could have been a little bit more, I think.
Absolutely. Kind of the finish kind of saw Big Show punching MVP with the right hand, Miz getting win there.
Yeah, the coveted knockout punch from the Big Show, getting hit with a toaster, I would imagine.
Yes.
Probably swinging a toaster at you. That's a big hand.
And then our main event was an Elimination Chamber match for the World Heavyweight title.
Listen to these names that Tim names off here in this match.
Absolutely. You had Chris Jericho getting the win here against CM Punk, John Morrison, Rey Mysterio, R-Truth, and The Undertaker. The Undertaker coming in as the champion. What's interesting to note is all these guys are still relevant today.
Yep.
They're either wrestling or they're involved in the business somehow. CM Punk obviously not wrestling right now, but he's back with Fox doing the WWE backstage show.
Yeah, I mean, out of all the names there, he's the only one not actually wrestling. I mean, even Luke Gallows that came with Punk in the Straight Edge Society, he's still going. And you have R-Truth's got to be like, 80? I think he's in his 50s, honestly. I think he's like 51, 52.
Something like that.
And he's still going 30.
Yeah.
And this is back when R-Truth was actually not like a laughable character. He was a fan favorite type character, but he started the match off. And it was a good start to the match. And they went about 4 minutes or so, him and Punk. And then Punk got the microphone and kind of did his I'm better than you straight edge thing. And then Rey Mysterio came out after that, and then we were opposites. But I like how this match was pretty much one-on-one the whole match.
Yeah.
It was one person got eliminated. 5 minutes are up. Here comes another guy. It was way different than the first match.
Absolutely.
It made it really different. And Tim actually pointed this out to me a couple weeks ago when we were going to get ready to do this episode originally. The Undertaker makes a beeline to the ring after the pyro. So I made sure I watched it back. And yeah, he comes out real slow. They pan to the ring, and you pan back, and the Undertaker's hauling ass down the stage. And even Michael Cole's like, oh, he's so ready to go. He slams his stuff down. It's because he caught fire.
Yeah, he got fired.
It was definitely it was funny to hear Michael Cole be like, he's so ready to go. He just stormed to the ring. It's like, no, dude, he caught fire.
He got burned. And I heard that pyro guy was fired that day.
Yeah, it was definitely thankfully not any worse than it could have been, because those were when they had those flaming fireballs coming up. So he, it was funny because, like I said, they show him come off to the stage. They pan back to the ring because obviously you want that dramatic effect. They go back and he's already at the bottom of the ramp. His hat's off. He throws his belt on the ground. Everybody was like, and then like I said, Michael Cole goes, "Whoa, he stormed to the ring. He's so ready to go." It's like, sort of.
Go back and watch that. You'll see what we're talking about.
Like I said, I missed it the first time.
Yeah.
Tim pointed it out, and I was like, oh, yeah, no kidding. So I went and rewatched it. Yeah, it's quite the... I've never seen him get to the ring that fast, ever.
No.
He ran to the ring like he was on fire. The other interesting thing is, like Tim said, Chris Jericho wins this match.
Yep.
But how did he win the match?
Due to some interference, Shawn Michaels coming up, pulling up one of the greats of the Elimination Chamber, comes up and hits Sweet Chin Music on The Undertaker, and Chris Jericho takes advantage and gets the 1, 2, 3.
And that would set the feud for WrestleMania for probably two of... I think the two matches, and a little sidebar here, the two matches The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels had at WrestleMania were probably two of easily the best matches The Undertaker's had at WrestleMania.
Oh, absolutely.
They were great. This set up, that feud for WrestleMania, for the match at Mania, by him costing The Undertaker the title. So it worked out good. I actually had forgotten about that too until I went and rewatched the match, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. So it was definitely great creative, I think, to have it go that way.
And that's what you want. This is what this pay-per-view is designed to do. It's designed to get your WrestleMania feuds going, and especially in this main event, they certainly did that with the whole Shawn Michaels Undertaker issue.
Well, nowadays, the Elimination Chamber very seldom does the title change hands before WrestleMania. Yeah. Usually it's a filler. Like, everything changed hands here.
You had, you had 3 title changes with John Cena and Batista's 2, and then... Chris Jericho beating The Undertaker 3.
And you'll see when we get into the last year's Elimination Chamber, stuff doesn't change much.
No.
And I mean, I guess that's good and bad because you're building towards this match at WrestleMania. But you got to think about this. This was the last pay-per-view before WrestleMania in 2010, and you didn't know who was facing who. You had Edge winning the Rumble, and he hadn't decided what title he was going for yet. Mm-hmm. And you had McIntyre, who just won the Royal Rumble this year. He named it the next night.
Yep.
This is who I'm facing. So, like, it's definitely a different era than it is now than it was then. So...
Speaking of that, let's transition over to last year's Elimination Chamber pay-per-view.
Do we want to rate the 2010 one?
Oh,
just to give
absolutely, absolutely. To me, there was a little too much filler on the show. I did like the Elimination Chamber matches, but I'm going to give it probably a 6.5.
Yeah, I was going to say 6. I think the best matches on the card were the 2 chamber matches. I think I personally like the main event better than the first one a little bit, just because of the dynamic in it. But I hate how they did the Cena Batista thing at the end. I mean, I get it, but it was just something that had Cena won the match and the match ended and it had been that way, I think it would have been a little bit better for me, because you just had him go through this great match to just give belts to Batista. And I get it's creative. I know it is what it is, but I think those 2 matches, if you're going to watch anything, the 2 chamber matches are the ones to watch.
Absolutely.
Especially the last one.
Yes. With
everything going on with The Undertaker getting his hair burned off and then losing the title thanks to Shawn Michaels. It was good.
Yes. All right, now we'll transition over to...
we're going to the next one.
Elimination Chamber 2019. We're going to kick things off with a match on the pre-show with Buddy Murphy, who I believe is just being called Murphy now, defeating Akira Tozawa. This was for the Cruiserweight title.
Yeah, Buddy Murphy being in the one of the disciples to the Monday Night Messiah, Seth Rollins. But, I mean, it was a pre-show match. Both Tozawa and Murphy, I think, are underrated a little bit.
Yes.
They both can wrestle. They can put on good matches. They don't really have a look. That's their problem. Mm-hmm. Like we would discuss where Buddy Murphy kind of looks like a smaller Kane back in the day when he was the dentist.
With Isaac Yankem, yep.
But I mean, they don't really, but they can both wrestle. They're 205 Live type competitors that can do some high flying stuff, but also go. So it was a 13-minute match on the pre-show. Again, filler, but it was a good match.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're going to start off with an Elimination Chamber match for the inaugural WWE Women's Tag Team Championship. It's not really the inaugural because they've had this belt before, as we've discussed a few times on this podcast.
I think that's the wrinkle, though. It is technically the inaugural WWE.
Oh, true.
I think that's what they're writing on, getting the F out.
That
was their campaign.
That's
so,
true.
I mean, it's it is and it's not.
Yeah,
put it that way. It's not the companies first, but yes, yeah.
All right, we're going to run the names here. The Boston Hug Connection, Bayley and Tasha Banks would get the win here, defeating Carmella and Naomi, Mandy Rhodes and Sonya Deville, Nia Jackson, Tamina, the Iconics.
Iconics.
Yes. And the Riot Squad, which was Liv Morgan and Sarah Logan here. This match went pretty much what you expect for Elimination Chamber, about 33 minutes here. I thought this match was pretty good. I mean, I think it's tough to do a tag team Elimination Chamber match, so I think it could get a little, kerfuffled.
Jumbled.
Jumbled.
And it was interesting, too, with all the names there, that it came down to the Boston Hug Connection and Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. Mm-hmm. They were the last two teams in the match. It was interesting they went with Mandy Rose. As soon as Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville were the last team with the Boston, you kind of knew who was going to win.
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah, it was unfortunate they did it that way, because once it got down to those two, you just had the feeling, well, they're not going to give Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville the first ever titles.
Yeah. You would think it maybe came down to Nia Jackson, Tamina being the powerhouses.
Yeah.
May have been one.
Or even Carmella and Naomi, they were over enough where you could say, hey, maybe they might win.
Sure.
But when it came down to those two, and no offense to Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville, it's just the way they created when it was a little too predictable for me.
Yeah.
Once it got down to those two. But going into it, they had such a lead up with them wanting the titles. It was kind of a little predictable anyways. But you never, if it had been, Tamina and Nia Jax, you could have thought maybe they're going to roll them over and they'll end up, taking the titles. But it wasn't a terrible match. There was a lot of bodies in there, put it that way.
Next up, we had a tag team match for the SmackDown tag team titles. You had the Usos getting the victory over The Miz and Shane McMahon.
The best tag team in the world.
The best tag team in the world.
Don't forget to throw that in there.
Yes. I've said this a couple times on the show. I'm a big Shane McMahon mark, so I kind of like every match that he does. And this was no exception. I mean, a good, entertaining tag team match. They could have maybe done a little bit more with it, but again, I think entertaining. The entertainment factor was enough for me. So I kind of like this one.
It was the build-up from the Rumble of the Usos losing the titles to Shane and Miz, to then giving the titles back to the Usos, which would then lead to Shane turning on the Miz and having their match at WrestleMania. So it told a good story, and I agree with Shane McMahon for not being a trained wrestler.
Yeah,
he does some crazy stuff.
I know
stuff that other trained wrestlers would never do. So
that coast to coast move that he does, I mean, that is hard to do.
Well, not only that, you're jumping 20 feet across the ring and you're landing right on your back.
Yeah,
your head's, you can see when he hits hard. Mm-hmm. He's not protecting himself. He's trying to so then he's not the most agile for a wrestler. He still does some nice stuff, but when he does the stuff through the table, you see a signature move off the corner through the table, the announcer's table. He gets whipped around pretty hard. So for a guy, again, that's not a trained wrestler, he does some crazy stuff. You think Hell in the Cell match where he came off the top of the cell through the table.
Yeah.
I know Mick Foley did it before that and then through the cell and all that stuff. But for a guy, again, it impresses me for the skill he has not being a trained wrestler. Mm-hmm. And for being McMahon, having the name McMahon and being willing to do the stuff that he does.
Absolutely. Yeah, that whole family is crazy. They're always willing to do
I mean, it's funny too because Vince, whenever he was in the ring, you can only work so hard, so much with Vince.
Yeah.
Shane, he does back elbows, he does shooting star presses. I was gonna just say that. Yeah. He does so many impressive things for a guy that is not a trained athlete, trained wrestler. I mean, he does some MMA boxing type things. He trains that way for training purposes, but actual wrestling, he didn't go to a school or anything.
No.
And it's impressive to see, especially at his age at that time. Some of the stuff he did when he came back, he wasn't young anymore. He was gray. I mean, you could tell he'd gotten older, and he still did some crazy stuff.
Yeah. Just what he can do is amazing.
Yeah.
All right, next up, we have a handicap match here, and this is interesting. It's for the Intercontinental title. Finn Balor getting the win over Bobby Lashley and Lio Rush here.
The man of the hour,
yes.
Lio Rush. I remember going to... did you go to the SmackDown show where he debuted afterwards? That was up around here?
I might have. I remember going to one of them.
Yeah, I remember they just debuted him on 205 Live, which used to go after SmackDown. And like everybody then thought he was a big deal, which he's an athlete. Yep. Attitude-wise, I think that's what holds him back. I've heard things that he is very difficult to work with. But skill-wise, he's an underrated talent skill-wise. But I think his attitude makes people that have to work with him not appreciate what he can do.
What he can do, yeah, that's definitely holding him back. I mean, you gotta be the whole package to succeed. You gotta not only have the in-ring work and the capability, but you also got to have the right attitude for them to see something in you.
Right, exactly. And you can't just have one or the other. I mean, if you can't go and you have a great attitude, that's wonderful, but you can't put on a good match. He can put on a good match, but apparently he's not very well liked for the attitude he carries, the way he carries himself.
Finn Balor here, obviously, a lot has changed for him in this past year, going back to NXT, which to me, I think they did that to compete with AEW. I think they did that for ratings.
I mean, and he was off TV, so it made sense to make a big thing. And I think it's cool that they're willing to go backwards now. For a while, they weren't. It was once you were up on the main roster, you were up.
Yeah.
I mean, and now you see that it's almost a foregone conclusion that Charlotte's going to face Rhea Ripley. I mean, they haven't announced it yet, but I mean, to see that and see it the opposite direction, and you got to think. You think of NXT, you think of Charlotte Flair, and you think of Finn Balor. Those are two of them in your head. Like at the beginning of NXT, that's who you think of.
Sure.
So I mean, it definitely makes sense where he is now. This was honestly kind of like a filler match too, though. I mean,
yeah, it really was.
It was a way to get the title off of Bobby Lashley without beating Bobby Lashley, making him, the Almighty, making him still look good because Balor wins the match, but he ends up beating Lio Rush. But I mean, it was a 10-minute match. There was storyline up to it. That Finn Balor was this little guy that Bobby Lashley's a huge man. All things aside from the Lana storyline and all that stuff, Bobby Lashley is a big, imposing guy. So they played that up well. That he was the monster. He wasn't going to beat Finn. Finn Balor would never beat him, and he didn't. But he still got the title.
I want to just kind of go backwards a little bit when we talked about the 2010 Elimination Chamber. Speaking of NXT, that was right before NXT kind of started. Now, that was back when it was the reality show aspect where you had, pros and paired with the rookie. Yep. But that's kind of give you the time frame. So NXT is kind of approaching 10 years old this year.
Yeah, that was back when you had the inaugural, like you said, the NXT when it was a show, and the pro. You had that was the origination of the Miz Daniel Bryan storyline, and that still goes on off and on now
today. Yeah.
So like that, it was definitely interesting to because they talked about that in the promo before. Sure. So yeah, yep.
All right, next up, we had the Raw Women's title match. We had Ronda Rousey defeating Ruby Riott pretty quickly here, in less than 2 minutes. Just another filler match. I think just a way to get Ronda Rousey on the show.
This match sucked.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to say it. For this match right here sets women's wrestling back to what it used to be. This was not impressive. You had in Ruby Riott, it just came back from her injury, and the Liv Morgan storyline and everything else. They could have at least had a 5, 8, 10-minute match.
Yeah.
If you wanted Ronda Rousey to win, that's fine. But this match, all it does is it's stupid. I don't even get. And they had this giant buildup about Ruby Riott. I can beat a minute 40.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, who booked this crap? Like, it was garbage for them to book it that way.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm not saying you can't make Ronda Rousey look like a badass and beat her in 5, 6, 7 minutes, but a minute 40.
Yeah.
Why even have it on the pay-per-view? Put it on the pre-show. No one cares at that point.
To your point, it kind of defeats the purpose of the whole women's evolution, trying to give them more time and to showcase what they can do, and you're not showcasing anything.
No, it takes them longer to get to the. I forgot how short the match was until I went back and rewatched it, and I was like, "This is just garbage." I was like, if I were WWE, I would be embarrassed that we had that match on the same card as when we crowned the first WWE Women's Tag Team Champions. Because that's a joke.
Yeah.
That's what that is. It's a joke. And like I said, whoever the creative was behind that, shame on them because they missed an opportunity where they could have showcased what two women could have done. And all it would have done was help further Ronda Rousey in the wrestling business.
Yeah.
Because any match she has is it's practice at that point. She's going to WrestleMania as the champion. Ruby Riott's not going to beat her. But why waste a minute 40? Like I said, it took them longer to get to the ring.
Yeah.
It was pointless.
No, nothing to add there. I completely agree. Coming up next, we had a no disqualification match. You had Baron Corbin getting the win over Braun Strowman, which when I said that, I kind of thought, what? How did that happen? But they have the back storyline here. So he's got McIntyre and Bobby Lashley kind of behind him as his cronies.
Which is still what he's doing now. Fast forward a year later, Baron Corbin still has lackeys doing his dirty work for him.
Just now they're Robert Roode, sorry.
Yeah, it's not Bobby anymore. It's gone from Bobby Lashley, Robert Roode. So it's still the same guy, same name, but it's, obviously a big, massive bodybuilder type guy not that Robert Roode's a small guy, but... No. But yeah, no, it's the same story. And I had to do the same thing, because I saw the card, we look at the match card, and I'm like, how the heck did Baron Corbin... And it's like, okay, this is back when Drew McIntyre was a heel. When Ziggler brought him back, they were heel, they were tag team together, and it kind of transitioned into this, where he was, and this is back coming off the heels of Baron Corbin being the constable on. He's had some dumb gimmicks.
Yeah, I know.
Constable, king. It's interesting, but yeah, and it wasn't a terrible match, but it was a no DQ match, so you knew going in there was going to be some shenanigans somewhere.
And they won. They did the Shield powerbomb through 2 tables. And that was it. That was the win there for Baron.
Minus the ooh-ah.
Yes. And our main event was an Elimination Chamber match for the WWE title. You had Daniel Bryan.
The Planet's champion.
This is full heel, the new Daniel Bryan gimmick.
This is when he had the all-natural championship made out of wood and hemp. And
So Daniel Bryan will get the win over AJ Styles, Jeff Hardy, Kofi Kingston, Randy Orton, and Samoa Joe. This was kind of the start of Kofi Mania here when you look back at this. This was kind of this performance that Kofi Kingston lasted to the final 2 here, and based on his performance, it got the fans behind him, saying that he deserves the world title opportunity or the world title itself. So this match was kind of significant because this kind of sets us up for WrestleMania here.
Yeah, and like Tim just said, Kofi Kingston and Randy Orton in an Elimination Chamber match in 2019. They were in the same match in 2010. Which is amazing. To think back at, they started the pay-per-view in that original match. So, it's cool that they're still going now. And, I think that, you have the guys like Samoa Joe and Jeff Hardy are just kind of there. Who can be good performers, prolong any storyline you need to kind of get them to where they need to get to. You have AJ Styles, who is, a world beater when it comes to any kind of match you need to have. Probably the most impressive guy to never be to WWE until he got there finally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, Daniel Bryan, same kind of thing. He's one of those guys that can go. And then you have, of course, like I said, Kofi and then Randy. Overall, a very good match. And like you said, it started the Kofi Mania of, hey, let's give, and you look back on it, it's been 10 years just in the 9 years, just in the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view of them, of especially Kofi, of still being kind of fringe main event guy. So, it told a very good story, and like we said, it built to what it was at WrestleMania. Yeah,
kind of similar right to the 2010 pay-per-view. This one also setting up your WrestleMania match, one of your WrestleMania, so that's kind of what they're using this pay-per-view for. And I think they did that pretty well here. This was I thought a really good Elimination Chamber match here for me, and definitely setting up your WrestleMania match between Bryan and Kingston.
Yeah, and you got to remember too, this Elimination Chamber is the new Elimination Chamber, not the old. The old one, you watch that match, there's nowhere soft at all to land on that thing. You had steel grate. This one at least had what looked like almost platform type padding, not steel grate. It looks cooler because it's square. I think it makes it look a little different. But yeah, the Elimination Chamber concept, you think back to the first one, Eric Bischoff was supposedly the one that, came up with it, even though who knows exactly who came up with it.
I think that was more storyline than anything.
Right, and I'm doing air quotes when I said came up with it. But, the concept of it is going to be a true and tested concept that you can do at any time. It's a 6-person elimination match.
Yeah.
You just have it inside a Hell in a Cell type structure, and only certain people can get into the match at certain times. So, the concept of them is always going to be a good concept if it's done correctly. Yeah. And all the chamber matches that we just told you about, the 2010 and this one, they were done pretty well. Like I said, the tag team one lacked a little bit in storyline towards the end, but everything else was, and like I said, they were completely different. So that's what makes them nice. You can do a lot with them. So.
Absolutely. So I think that's going to wrap up our show on the Elimination Chamber 2019. Again, we do apologize that we were one day late, but better late than never.
Yep.
So we got the show out for you. And next week we're doing something a little bit different. It is Valentine's season. So we are going to take a look back at the St. Valentine's Day Massacre pay-per-view that took place in 1999.
Yeah, well, you figure Valentine's Day is next Friday.
Yep.
We're going to record the day after, so it's pretty fitting to kind of do that theme. Not saying Tim and I are Valentines, obviously.
No. We're both married.
Yeah, just so you guys know. But, lifelong friends. But anyhow, it was just fitting that the day after Valentine's Day is when we would be recording, so it just made sense. They had that kind of one-off pay-per-view. It's going to be a deep dive on it. It's going to be, a whole show on that pay-per-view, which has some pretty impressive names on it. Mm-hmm. So it should be good to look back on that.
And one really important debut. I'm not going to spoil it.
No, we won't. No spoilers here.
No spoilers here.
We're not Paul Heyman. We're not giving you a spoiler. But yeah, look forward to that next week. We plan on, like I said, it's going to be a little different. It's only going to be one thing we're talking about.
Sure. But
it's totally worth it for the concept of the fact that it's the day after Valentine's Day.
Day after Valentine's Day. I think it fits perfectly.
Yep. And we don't have to rush through. I mean, sometimes we kind of just breeze over some of these matches. This will give us a little bit more time to kind of get in depth with the matches. So it'll be kind of cool, I think.
Absolutely. All right, but that is coming up next week. And until then, I'm Tim.
And I'm Roland Pulis.
And this is Wrestling with Wrestling Past and Present.